Welcome to this research and practice event held on the 7th of April 2021. Today's speaker is Michel Verheem, who is joining us from Melbourne. Born and educated in the Netherlands, Michel came to Australia in 1991 and a decade and a half later founded a wayfinding company in Melbourne called ID Lab. It has recently expanded to Bordeaux in France, Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Zagreb in Croatia, and Oxford in the UK. ID Lab solves complex wayfinding problems and optimises people's experience in built environments around the globe. Good wayfinding design uses information systems to provide users and consumers with all the information they need to navigate environments efficiently. Signage is only one of the many information cues involved in wayfinding. ID Lab applies paradigms that come from the extensive body of research about behaviour and the environment. The title of Michel's presentation is Wayfinding, Signs and Science. After the presentation, you'll have the opportunity to ask Michel questions about his work. Over to you, Michel.
Okay, let's do this. I presume you see something now?
That's it. Yeah, I've got your screen.
Good. The very tall man on the left is my old friend Rob. We're standing in front of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Rob is a big guy, 2 meters and 15 centimeters to be exact. He spent 17 years in the Dutch army as a lieutenant, defending our small country from the big bad Russians. This was in the 80s, so there was still something to defend, and teaching young men and women how to be a soldier. Rob reads maps better than anyone I know. He will look at a map, study it for a bit, do something magical with a compass, then he folds up the map and puts it away. He has an innate ability to take in the cues from the map, put them to memory, and use those memorized cues exactly when he needs them. This is how Rob would navigate from the Arc de Triomphe to the Sacré-Cœur. Not only would he not need the map anymore, he would remember landmarks, street names, and be quite happy to walk to the destination using little side streets, cut-throughs, parks and passes. Rob is very good. The man on the right is me, a bit younger, a few kilos lighter, and already proudly bald. My name is Michel, and I get lost. I get lost a lot. I get lost in buildings, lost in cities. I get lost when riding my motorbike, and I get lost in hospitals. When Rob was running around in camouflage gear, I was working as a photographer. That same journey from earlier, from the Arc de Triomphe to the Sacré-Cœur, for me would have been something like this. I look on the map, try to get my bearings. I mumble to myself the first 5 or so instructions, walk down the main road until you hit the park, then walk to the park, and then I normally forget it. Most of the times I would feel confused after the 3rd or 4th instruction and get the map out again to check. So I am not very good at finding my way. I get lost a lot. I'm the opposite of Rob. It actually helps me to be a good wayfinding consultant. It is much easier for me to work from the viewpoint of a person with little knowledge about a building or urban space, which, coupled with my very process-minded thinking, allows me to develop very functional wayfinding solutions. Rob is an outlier. His ability to navigate, his ability to create a mental picture of the journey he has to take is fairly unique. People have varying levels of cognitive mapping abilities. For most, it gets better with age because age equates to experience, but for some, it will never work. As an example of being able to create and memorize a map in one's mind, check out this artwork by Kim Dingle. It shows what some teenagers think the USA looks like. And this is a floor plan from a library at some US university. Students were asked to draw the different floors from memory. Some drawings resemble the actual library, whilst others are conceptual at best. It's no wonder it is so easy to get lost. We all get lost. And that is just as well, I say, as a wayfinding consultant, completely unbiased, because as a consultant, wayfinding consultant, my role is to think up and design the information that people need to find their way efficiently. You may have expected me to say, my role is to design good signage. In fact, many people also in architecture still think that a wayfinding consultant is the same as a signage consultant. Here's a simple example of the difference between a signage designer solving a wayfinding problem and a wayfinding consultant solving a wayfinding problem. As a wayfinding strategist, we don't see signage as our primary tool. I personally think that signage is highly overrated and mostly used way too much. Something like not seeing the trees for wood, perhaps. And that is understandable. So asking most signage designers to solve a wayfinding problem is akin to asking a butcher what he recommends for dinner. It is very unlikely that the butcher will say, have fish, or make a vegetarian salad. Unlikely, because what a butcher will do is he will recommend sausages. As a semi-interlude, I'll give you a quick overview of how I got into wayfinding. Wayfinding is clearly not in the mind of many children when they are young. Like every boy, I wanted to become a fireman or a policeman. Actually, policeman I did become, but that's a story for another day. I had an interesting but relatively short career in photography with lots of food and packaging photography, rather boring, and lots of fun doing wedding photography. But after that, I worked in a signage manufacturing company in the Netherlands, and we worked very closely with graphic designers that work on signage projects. I often ask myself there is why they would design the signage the way they did and why they located the signage the way they did. I would ask those questions, but never really got a satisfactory answer. They were designers. They wanted to design beautiful stuff. Many designers care much more about beauty than they do about functionality. I then studied marketing communication, and as an elective, I did psychology. That really interested me, the thinking about and the knowledge about actual people and actual behaviors. And during one of those lectures, it really hit me. There must be a connection between people's behavior and direction giving. By the way, I'm not using the word wayfinding here because at the time, this was kind of mid-80s, wayfinding was, as a word, was not on my radar. From there on, I started reading whatever I could about how to influence navigational behavior in the built environment. And stop this. And voila, after a few more years doing that, I became a wayfinding strategist. I'm not a wayfinding designer. In fact, I can't design if my life depended on it. I deal with functionality. We've got other people in our studios that then shape the functional requirements into beauty. My role is the thinking around what cues people need, where, and when. The basics of wayfinding is that you need to know where you are, you need to know where you want to go, or need to be, and you need to know how you can and should do this. And wayfinding cues come in many different guises, but they have one thing in common: they need to be able to be seen. You need to see the cue. You need to recognize that that cue is meant for you. You need to be able to read the cue, understand it, and lastly, you need to be able to do what the cue tells you to do. And then you repeat that until you reach your destination. Wayfinding cues can be in your face with an instruction that is simple and doable, or they can be a little bit more subtle. For instance, through clever architectural design. I presume that many of you have never been to Rotterdam Central Station, but when you walk towards it, you understand where to look for the entrances. It's somewhere underneath the letters, Centraal Station. And in this photo, if somebody would direct you to level 2, you'd probably get from the design that the vertical transport is in the red house. And sometimes it is as simple as following a clear path that has no other obvious directional choices. We also use cues that come from what we call educated seeking. Although you may be in a strange environment, you use knowledge of similar environments as cues for navigation and behavior. We also refer to this as the aha behavior. And this will show people's age if you actually recognize who this is. You get more points if you do recognize it. An example is a small church in a small town somewhere in Spain. If I would drop you just outside town here with an instruction to go to the church, you would probably walk into town. In fact, you would look for the town center because those small towns are normally built around the church. You would recognize that you were getting closer because there would be more shops, more people, the closer you get to the center of town. And when you reach the church, you probably know where the entrance will be and you know how to recognize that entrance. You even know how to behave when you walk in. You know, you'll be quiet and you take your hat off. Most people would be able to do this because they've experienced similar things in the past. It's the same with more day-to-day things. If you go to a supermarket that you've never been to and you need to buy milk, you will automatically walk through the recognizable entrance. You will walk past the fresh fruit and past the vegetables, the cold meats and the cheese to the back of the store. It gets quite confusing if the milk is not at the back. And in fact, people feel actually quite upset if their expectations are not met, especially if their expectations from learned behavior. So when you design a new supermarket, we think it is good to understand those behaviors and expectations and design the supermarket in a similar way if you want to have people have similar experiences. Landmarks are great to make sense of difficult to interpret environments. A maze like this, as opposed to a maze like this. A landmark can be used in an instruction such as walk down there until you see the Statue of Liberty and then do X, Y, Z. It's also a great way to reassure people on the way back. In fact, that is where we use it most. People's experience is, oh yes, I have passed this when I came, so I recognize I'm now taking the same way back. And the return journey in most projects is the trickiest journey. Not everything works as a landmark. It needs to be recognizable and not to be confused with something. I always use an example that you should not use a kangaroo and a wallaby as separate landmarks because for most people, they are both kangaroos. Next, you need to be able to describe it. So something quite abstract will not do, but the famous Docklands cow in a tree as a description will. The it's great if the landmark is directional, so it has a front and a back and a left and a right, so that people on their return journey, again that infamous return journey, understand that they are on their way back, not that they've been walking in circles and passing the same landmark again. It needs to work for different ages and cultures. So in an Australian hospital, a statue of Slim Dusty is out. And it cannot just be a color, and I'll get back to that in a sec. So if you say to somebody, it's the entrance with the blue bear, everybody will get this. You also understand from what way you have approached this entrance. So for the return journey, you know where to go on your return journey. It's a perfect landmark, describable, it has direction, and it is unmissable. Back to France. Actually, I don't really have a thing with France, but I just had great photos. The Eiffel Tower is an interesting landmark. It has recognizability, yes. You can describe it, yes. It works for all ages and cultures, yep. It is more than just a color. The only thing that it doesn't have is has a direction on it. So wherever you are in Paris, from many locations you can see the Eiffel Tower, but it doesn't tell you where you are in Paris. So it misses one of those 5 components of landmarks, and therefore for certain instructions it is less effective. Obviously colors. There's not a project that I've worked on ever where somebody did not say at some stage, why don't we just give the levels colors? And colors, of course, are very powerful mnemonic devices. However, they're often overused. We already spoke about things that need to be describable and not to be confused with something else. And with colors, that's actually pretty limited. We can talk about light green and dark green, or light blue and dark blue. But then you get into light yellows and dark yellows, or light reds and dark reds. It already gets a little bit weird. Which, of course, in this hospital, this is the largest hospital in Belgium, they didn't really understand. They're using 17 colors here in their wayfinding system, and I believe they've added a few since. Another advantage, and at the same time disadvantage, of giving color a meaning is that when they're used in context, like here, where you see blue columns, but you also see the blue used for accessible access and accessible parking. Does that mean that this whole floor is accessible parking? So you have to think about those kind of decisions when you design. And of course, the simplest thing is that some colors just don't work for people that have color blindness, and that's 8% of men. So that's a large chunk of people actually that have difficulties in distinguishing certain colors. Another big problem with colors is that we can't use them for sequential coding. I just mentioned that there's not a project really where somebody doesn't say, why don't we just color the floors? And that is because there is no sequence in colors. So we've got yellow, and we've got green, and we've got, I don't know, fuchsia or dark red or purple. I don't know what the third color is. But what is the fourth color? I don't know, and nobody else will. Same challenge we've got with using symbols or pictures like this is that there's no sequentiality in this. Just as well, as we always say, is that as people, and in fact all people in the world, we've learned and agreed on a fantastic sequential coding methodology, numbers and letters. Let's just use that because it's clear and people understand it. Almost last in here is the research that we've done on the comprehension of pictograms in health environments. We're asked by the Department of Health in New South Wales for a recommendation around the use of pictograms on hospital wayfinding signage. The results were not very surprising. Only pictograms that people have learned and are using in normal life, or pictograms that immediately made sense in the context that they're being used, for instance, the stair pictogram here, were understood. The stair pictogram is one of those pictograms that work if you have them next to stairs. They won't work if you don't have them next to stairs, because then the context is lost. So those pictograms are recognized, and most health-specific ones had too limited recognition. And that is logical, because pictograms are symbols that are learned just the same way we understand that the letter A stands for the letter A, or we pronounce it as an A, or the numeral 8 is an 8. And it's really tricky with some of the medical procedures to do that in a single picture. So if you want, you can unmute. I need a volunteer to tell me what the left top pictogram is.
I need a hug.
Yes. Other options? I'm just going to be silent until I get a response. So sitting back doesn't help people.
Oh, welcome.
It means physiotherapy. And do you know what this one is? The second row in the middle?
Audiology?
It has something to do with hearing, yes. It's a pictogram for translator. Well, clearly stuff that you can't use in isolation. So you can't just have the pictogram. And with that, the use of the pictogram is not necessary. We don't need it anymore. If we have to say the word, let's just use the word. The word cannot be, or should not be able to be interpreted in different ways. And of course, the pictograms on the right are learned pictograms. We've learned that that a black dot on something black means a man, and that this means a woman. It is not a woman, and it is not a man. It's just something that we've learned. In one of the projects where the client was determined to have almost everything done in pictograms, we asked them for a solution for this one, and then they stopped asking the questions. Okay, last but not least, my bugbear about research. I think that too little is done in wayfinding. There's too little research that we do. There's too little research that our clients ask for. It's not for the lack of trying, in my view. It's for the lack of interest from our clients. And it's interesting because they all talk about best practice. You know, I haven't read a brief for a project that doesn't say we want best practice. And I haven't read a brief that says we want evidence-based. But when we then in a project say, so what kind of funding have you got available for research? They never put their money where their mouth is. Which is sad, I have to say. They often just say, do what you've done in other projects. And that is sad. So we hardly do testing. That is testing with our clients in real life. And we hardly do post-occupancy testing paid for by our clients. We do it, but it's very hard to get our clients to collaborate in those post-hoc testing projects, which I think is not good. So I'm actually quite interested to hear from you what experience you have with that discrepancy between clients wanting evidence-based, but not necessarily wanting to fund us, us as research-focused people to actually create that evidence. And also, I'm interested to hear from you a wayfinding experience that was either particularly good or particularly bad, and also why you think it was particularly good or particularly bad. And normally I play some thinking music, but in this case I will show you some of my favorite signage related photos. This doesn't look like much, but it's actually one of my favorite subjects, which is, can we just use normal language? So why does it here say area subject to inundation? Maybe it's just because English is not my first language, but why can't it say this area can flood? Do not enter when flooded. Right? Can we speak normal normal English that people understand better without the heavy cognitive load that they get when they have to read this? This is near an ex-colleague of mine in Penrith. So you're not allowed to turn left. It's actually impossible because they've got poles there stopping you to turn left. And then it says emergency vehicles accepted, as if emergency vehicles need your permission to do something. That is not how it works with emergency vehicles. And I know that because I used to be a policeman. Stop or don't stop. Something you see quite often, unauthorized rubbish dumping prohibited. Normal rubbish dumping is quite okay. You can dump as much rubbish as you want. Just the unauthorized parts are not allowed. And I've tried to figure out what this means, why it is here. I don't know. I think it was a joke for people like me. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. Back to the discussion.
Michel, what was the first question that you asked?
I'm interested to hear what experience you've got with the discrepancy between clients demanding evidence-based, but when you say let's create some evidence or let's go and look for some evidence, that they go, oh yeah, but we don't want to pay for that.
Yeah, so probably they would be expecting consultants and architects to pay for that type of research.
Yeah, the funny thing is though, Jack, is that so everything that we do in our business is paid for by a client at some stage, right? All our money comes from the client. And if the requirement is you need to do evidence-based stuff, but they are not willing to invest in that, and the other clients are not willing to invest in that, how can we ever develop a good body of evidence other than that we pay for that ourselves, which, you know, it's not our business model, is to do the things that a client needs at our own cost.
Yeah, specific to a client's project. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Hi, Michelle, it's Michaela. How you going?
Hi.
I think some of it comes down to the fact that clients employ consultants because they believe that the research has been done already, or that the research is built into the experiences and the knowledge that consultants have. That's why we are consultants. And so when it's kind of identified as a separate thing to what all the other things that consultants deliver in a project, it makes it less palatable.
Yeah, but when they say, can we have 20 more project management hours? You say, yeah, that's fine, here's your fee.
I know. I understand your frustration. It's not just wayfinding, it's across the board.
I got that,
Yeah.
yeah. What about a good or bad wayfinding experience, people?
Hi, Michel. This is Prana from the Sydney studio.
Hello.
Well, working from home, but part of the Sydney studio.
I thought you had a propeller on your head.
Looks like that, doesn't it? I'm not going to take off. We have just finished an AFC for 2 large-scale metro projects. And we've been working with Transport for New South Wales and Sydney Metro as our not only as our end users, but as our wayfinding principal developers to give us their style guides to develop the front of house signage solutions for these 2 metro stations. We've had quite an intense experience in terms of the way transport intends to document, and it's a very tedious form of documentation.
I think that's the understatement of the year.
Well, having said that, it obviously, we're actually the architects for the stations as well. So we've had to develop the kit of parts from the transport kit of parts, and at the same time provide Transport and Sydney Metro enough flexibility to come in and change whenever they like, to have full access, because they intend to digitally provision all aspects of these projects, as it progresses, because they need containment, etc., etc. My question: Transport has had a very strict requirement, and this is something which I'm going to throw out to the bigger team as well, of 30% luminance contrast, which they would want to be implemented to their signage to the rest of the built environment, which is fine for the materiality of the station architecture, which is white GRC panels, which is glass reinforced concrete, which is white, but the signage is dark gray, which is a transport color. But they have been so insistent on integrating that 30% luminance contrast within the elements which are integrated into the kit of parts. So if there is an emergency exit sign, which is within the suspended signage structure, and that emergency illuminated emergency exit sign needs to have some kind of other than the transport sign. Now that cover has to have a 30% lighter luminance contrast to the signage, to the transport sign, and it's ended up giving a very patchy look to the entire signage. The entire strategy, because of this point, has because we had a lot of CCD testing, and in that, no customer experience or no customer pointed out that as an aspect of not being able to relate to their orientation as to what part of the station they were in. I just want to ask everyone, do you think this 30% luminance, I'm happy to share a few visuals with you after this presentation. Where do you find this aspect falling kind of through the holes a little bit? Because this aspect doesn't, for us, it just falls flat. We feel it's not essential. It is implemented within the station architecture, but it does not, it just ends up making the entire signage band look like light gray, dark gray, light gray, dark gray, light gray, dark gray. It's got this zebra pattern happening, which just defeats the purpose of integrating wayfinding solution because of this luminance contrast of transport elements to the rest of the signage band, which is running like a seamless services band throughout the station. I don't know. Is there a way to?
I've got part of an answer or a possible answer. Let's just say it's an opinion at the moment because I would need to test it. One is, I think the starting point is that organizations like putting numbers on things, because a number they can tick off, so approve or not approve. So the 30% is an approve or not approve thing. The performance specification would be this element needs to work in the space. That is a performance specification, but that's really difficult to test. You would have to do way more testing. And as I put earlier, I think that many people, maybe except for transport, because they do a fair bit of testing, the testing part of it would make it take longer and be much more expensive. So therefore, ticking a box is much easier. And I think that often we as designers either don't push back hard enough or have the right language to come up with a proposed solution that will actually tick the boxes of usability, but not necessarily tick the boxes of 30%. 30% is, in certain circumstances with certain colors behind it and certain light reflection and etc., may not be necessary. But longer process and much more difficult to prove, and very unsafe for a person that needs to approve it on the client side, because somebody from a disability organization, they will put the luminous meter on it and they go, that's 28%.
Yeah.
Tick, we'll sue you. So I get it. And it's, it's the part that I said about, we would like to do way more testing. We would like to do way more in situ testing. Let's build a space. Let's fake build a space and create something there, and test it out. And especially for really large infrastructure projects, such as railway stations, where the investments are huge.
Yeah.
Maybe there could be more testing done and more risks taken. Maybe that's a way to describe it.
Yes. I think this testing probably is a stage 4, stage 5 aspect that we have recommended to transport multiple times, because these metro stations are new builds. Sydney's, catching up to the transport network in developing all the Sydney metro stations. And the Northwest, Sydney Metro Northwest is fully functional, running with 11 stations. And transport says, no, that's a complete disaster. Ignore that.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's 11 stations, right? Yeah. So it's a new build, so testing stages, but it's a very, it's something that Sydney Metro, being the government side of things as our client, keeps our non-compliance register open. And they said, no, not ticking, you haven't achieved 30% contrast, we are not compliant, you're wrong. And you're like, just listen to what we're trying to say.
Yeah, and I think Transport for New South Wales is an interesting beast. I think that the Wayfinding department is really eager to make it work.
Yes.
And it is part of a big government body where at some stage an engineer will go, let me look through my luminous meter, it is 29.8%. Sorry, that is not compliant. And I don't care whether it works or not. By the way,
not compliant.
I as the engineer, I will never test that, because I'm not interested in having it work or not. I'm interested in ticking the box.
Okay. So, that was mine.
This is something that over a couple of glasses of wine, we could talk for hours over.
I've been doing it for 16 months now, 17 months.
The wine or the talking?
Right, trying to convince, because as I said, we're the architects for the station. So the directors, and there are multiple architecture studios that we've been liaising with, because of the stage development for each was handed over to different architecture studios. And it's been a combined effort to convince Sydney Metro that this luminance contrast is existing between the materiality of the station and the signage band. It doesn't essentially need to exist with an error while all the levels of customer testing. the customers didn't say, "Oh, I can't read that sign. It's all the same color." It's that never came up. So, but we failed as of now to implement that dialogue or that reasoning that it is not a failure to not have that 30% contrast. It is there between GRC and signage ban.
I think we find that it adds more visual clutter.
Anyway, yeah, it's a few glasses of wine to taste it.
So, sorry, did you want to expand on that, Andy? What was that?
Sorry, I was just saying, yeah, I mean, it's not wrong to do it, but what I think it does is it adds more visual clutter to a really busy space, especially at a peak hour time as well. And the intent was for a much more seamless, integrated design. And and as you were saying, like, who can tell the difference between grey and grey? It's really grey and grey, 30% contrast. So it's just been a particular issue that's we've been fighting for a while now.
Yeah, and the part in what you say, and I can only respond to the words, I don't know the project, but the drive for a seamless integrated design does not make it functional all the time. You know? So the functionality also needs to be there, but also knowing the work that transport does a little bit, I think that they are at times very much into box ticking and very, very little into giving, you know, the people like you and us a bit of freedom, as long as we can prove that it works.
That's right.
Well,
I mean, they constantly bring up points saying during customer whenever it works against them and customer testing had issues with something, then it comes back on us. But when we put up a hand and say, well, customers didn't have any issues with this, and suddenly, but they kind of turn a blind eye to it all.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just something that I understand that we all sort of have to deal with.
Yeah. Are there any other good or bad examples of a wayfinding experience?
Let's ask for maybe a good one.
Sorry.
Cynthia, Nathan, Yvonne, Orr, Riley, Benjamin, Daniel, Tristan. It can't be that you've gone through life without wayfinding experiences.
I'm happy to comment.
Have plenty. Go on.
I'm happy to comment. I'm a regular shopper at Chadstone, and I always get lost, even though I do teach retail marketing at university. So it's amazing how in a very common environment like shopping center, myself and I guess many people are confused, and I'm never sure to what extent that's a bit on purpose. So you kind of wander off in directions where you wouldn't think of going, and you end up shopping in a different shop than you think. And that's one of my interests, to find out more about that. But it's intriguing. Now, what's your view on that, Michel, in terms of the kind of general way in which people are guided to certain destinations in like shopping centers?
I don't know whether they do it intentionally. I've never heard a big shopping center owner say, do the ways. I've got a little experience in big retail environments. We've done a massive job in Bahrain. We've done shopping centers in Vietnam, and for them it was about functional wayfinding. People need to understand where they are, where facilities are, where car parking is. And what I just mentioned about the emotional effect on people when they feel lost, it is a really powerful emotional feeling. So for me, I think that's clear to you guys that I get lost a lot, but I will never go to Chadstone for that reason. So they could have the best shops in the world. I do not go there because I've had, really bad experiences there that I felt, and I get double annoyed because I should know, for fuck's sake. Somebody knows it, I should know. Same as you, Harm, you go, yeah, how come did I feel lost? But the emotion of feeling lost is so strong that I can't really imagine, but I've never researched this, that they would intentionally say, or that they would say, get people intentional, lost is not the word. I think that again, that's, whatever you get from me, by the way, is completely biased. It's just what I think. It's not the truth per se. It is that for most of those things, it's an exercise in signage. Let's do signage. Off you go. Bang. Does it look good? Yep. Does it have the majors on it? Yep. Okay, go. You can see that. I was just talking to somebody this morning with the implementation and the over implementation of wayfinding kiosks everywhere. Now, wayfinding kiosks are still seen as the solution to every wayfinding problem in the world. And I have seen 3 good ones in my life where I thought, this really worked. It works because the instructions that I could give the machine were easy to do. The instructions that came out of the machine were easy to read. They all had a print, by the way, because I can only remember, 2.3 instructions. And it worked with the environment. And most digital things are off the shelf. Here is your piece of software. Put a map in it and look at how beautiful our little man runs across the map. So my completely biased view would be they don't really think about the wayfinding other than let's do some nice looking signage.
I have another retail wayfinding nightmare, and that is IKEA. I find it so overwhelming and lacking in landmarks that I don't go there.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say it, Matthew, because IKEA has changed the way that they provide information. So a couple of years ago, they implemented clearer signage, and also they made it clearer that there were shortcuts in the shop. The thing though is that, so I know that because I know the company who developed that in the Netherlands. By the way, did you know that IKEA is a Dutch company, not a Swedish company?
I did not.
No, it's registered in the Netherlands, because turns out that the Netherlands has better tax laws than Sweden. I think that the challenge is that one is they don't really advertise it. People go to IKEA with the expectation of getting lost, and therefore they don't really look for information, because almost everybody that I've ever spoken to where we talk about the IKEA experience, and I say, but there is new stuff there. I've never heard anybody go, oh yeah, and I used it.
Thanks for letting me know. Where we go. Right, that's good. Sure, I can.
Car park signage, I always find it really difficult. Do you color the levels? Do you number the levels? Do you color and number the levels?
Yeah,
it's hard to get right, I think.
Yes, and so we have a number of rules in wayfinding. The simple ones, Andy, that an arrow that points to the left will be on the left-hand side, an arrow that points to the right will be on the right-hand side. If you ever do that different in our business, you don't have a job anymore. We don't use Helveticas, that's another rule. But another rule is that coding needs to be sequential. It needs to be understood, and we will tell people that it is a code that stands for something. So for instance, the letter A next to a lift, we will say, this is lift A. We don't just put the letter A there. So in car park levels, we will always have level numbers, preferably numbers, because it works in that context. People have an expectation that when you go up and down, that you go from level 3 to level 2, not necessarily from D to C, although there's still sequentiality in there.
Split level car parks where there's 2A and 2B, that they get tricky too, but it's not a definitive 1, 2, 3, 4.
No, and one way of dealing with that sometimes, not in everyone, is to not think about levels the way an architect thinks about levels. Because giving levels a code, 1, 2, 3, or ABC, or kangaroo and koala, is completely artificial. So level 2A could easily be 2, and level 2B could easily be 3, because it is what we say it is. If you walk up to level what you would consider, or what some people would consider as 2B, and you see 2B, you think it's 2B. If it says level 3, it's level 3. And then in a lift, you just fool people because you say this button goes to level 2 and level 3. People will just.
And funny, and I've had friends, and I'll go to car park, and I'll ask them after we go back, what color were we on? They have no idea. They don't remember a color. They have no idea what color. It's the number. And then some people don't remember numbers. Yeah, I guess it's good to have both, mate.
Yeah, and if it's really important, what we would do is we would say this is level 2, the orange level. You know, the more we can say, the more chance we've got that people will remember it. So it's, you know, this is level 2, the kangaroo level. And we will repeat that, and we'll be on the columns, and it will always say this is the kangaroo level, and then it will have an image of a kangaroo. You know, all those different cues will create a better memory, is what we think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? It's just on a completely different track. You were saying that your way into this career was via photography, the police force, and then I think marketing and communications. Before the session, I read a little bit about wayfinding, because I was wondering what career pathway people would need to take to become a wayfinder. And I read that it covers many fields such as psychology, sociology, human geography, business studies, stakeholder studies, culture studies, signage design, and user experience studies. So what course of study would you advise someone to take if they wanted to become a wayfinder?
I'm going to turn that around a bit. So we have 2 types of people in the studio. One are the wayfinding designers. They're normally graphic and industrial designers, and we've got strategists. Wayfinding designers, they have a design background, industrial or graphic normally. It's nice if they understand information design. So it's nice if they understand that certain things, certain pieces of information are easier to take in when you do it in certain ways. You know, the example that I just had about this sign that spoke about inundation or something. Yep, inundation. So an information designer would say, this area can flood. Yeah. And sometimes it's nice to have English as your second language, because you make everything much simpler. People that are good at wayfinding strategy, it actually doesn't really matter where they come from. They often come from design fields, because that's where the introductions to wayfinding happen. But the most important things in our thinking is that they can look at something and break that up in little process-focused steps. Because wayfinding is an understanding what a process is in the smallest possible steps, and then make decisions about at what step of a person's journey do we need what information. How the information gets presented is something that that happens in between the strategist and the designers, but that information needs to be presented somewhere. You can only do that when you are skilled at breaking something down in the real process steps. There's an example. We did a project in Belgium, a big hospital. We do a lot of hospitals, by the way. You'll hear me talk about hospitals a lot. 1150 bed hospital, large thing. We looked at a journey which I think was 28 meters. So going to the main entrance, going through an airlock, checking in and sitting down, waiting for some admin person to do something with you. 28 linear meters or 38 linear meters was a short journey, but 58 different decisions that you had to make. So 58 times you had to decide something. You had to look at it. Some were simple. You had to look at this main entrance and go, oh yes, this is the main entrance. Yes, it is correct. Let me step through this main entrance. Oh, now I have to turn. Do I turn here or do I turn? Do I turn left or do I turn right? Oh no, I should turn left. Hey, there's a reception. Do I go to the reception? No, I should not go to the reception. I should go to here. Oh, how do I know that? I know that because there's a sign, or I know that because my journey is blocked. Or okay, I need to go to a check-in kiosk. Is this a check-in kiosk? Yes, it's a check-in kiosk. I should use that. How do I use it? Have I got my card with it? What do I do? So 58 decisions before you would sit down. And bad wayfinders go, oh yeah, you walk inside and you go to the kiosk and then you interact with the kiosk. Good wayfinders go, 58, let me just check. Decision number 1, is that clear? Is this main entrance clear? Do we have to change anything architecturally? Do we do some other landscaping? Okay, that step is clear. Then when you walk in, do you turn left to right? How do you know it? Why is that? Do we have to change it? Do we change something in the environment? Do we add a sign? Do we say a person? Have we got wrong with that? So wayfinding strategy, process. Wayfinding design, industrial, graphic, and information design. And then there's another step, and Jack, that's your background also. The environmental psychology part. I would love to have a few environmental psychologists with possibly some graphics in understanding or information design. Would be really interesting to have people from those different backgrounds, different studies as part of the business. Yeah. So I've got two really good strategists. One is an architect who, when you ask her what she had for dinner yesterday, you will get all the ingredients. You'll get the cooking times. You'll get which pan she used, how she did the dishes. So we're careful with asking what she had for dinner. And our strategy director has this completely processed, focused mind. It's scary at times. Yeah.
Are there any more questions? I'm conscious that it's just a little after 1 here in Melbourne. If there are no more questions, I'm going to thank you very much, Michel, for coming in today. Thank you for the presentation and imparting all your knowledge.
You're welcome.
And
this is not all my knowledge, Jack.
Not at all. Not all of it.
I'm not going to say everything.
We'll save a bit for the next one. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you in a month.
Thanks, Jack.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.